Jones is one of my other co-organizers, and Rebecca Bilbrow is also helping us. Also, Pavan Markuka is also joining us as one of our organizers. Next time we'll have his picture up on here. I just wanted to give a couple announcements. As always, we're looking for more speakers. Several of you have emailed me. Please continue to do that. We're setting up our schedule. Our goal is to try to get to do one meetup per month and keep the really get the momentum going with Data Science DC. I also wanted to announce, many of you have seen the announcements, we're doing a DC DataCon on October 3rd. This is going to be our signature event for the DC data community. We'll have an all-day event with speakers in a wide variety of data fields. We'd encourage you to try to sign up. I think we have the early enrollment going on right now where you get a discount. So I encourage you to go look at our website and meet up. And if you're interested, sign up for that while we still have the discount available. With that, I'd like to turn over to Fayez. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So basically, I'll just tell about some of the DC2 community which we are part of. As you guys know that there are various organizations in DC2. We have database, women in data science, and DSDC is just one part of it, which is looking at different parts of data science, and the conference is a part of that. Now, we would like to thank our organizers, and there is some offer on O'Reilly. As you can see in the bottom, there is 20% off on JupyterCon and Strata. And we have some goodies, but we haven't decided how to distribute them yet. So maybe that will be in the next meetup. We would also like to thank our organizers, or basically the venue, which is, BWU has MS in Business Analytics. You guys should look up the course. It's quite good. So before we move forward, we would like to have the 15-second announcements. Anyone who has job offers or basically want to announce a meetup or a conference, they can stand up and speak for 15 seconds. Please try to stick to the timeline. Anyone has any announcements? Yep.
What is the for the higher data science?
Then you come forward if you want. Any other announcements?
On to another quick one. We're always looking for sponsors for these events. If your company would be interested in sponsoring, please contact me or Fayez or Tommy. We have different levels of sponsorship. We also provide as part of that a way of helping your recruiting if you're trying to find people in the data science field. So again, if you have any need for that, please contact us. We're always looking for sponsors. Our sponsors pay for the food and make all this happen. So again, please contact me. Thanks.
And yeah, especially people who are looking for recruitment, at the end of the talk, they can come forward and stand here. So basically, people looking for the jobs can meet them here in the front side. So, and as usual, we have data drinks at Tonic. It's at the 3rd floor of Tonic. So once the talk is over, you guys are free to come forward and discuss the queries and talk amongst us, and then we'll walk over to Tonic.
What did they say the first one was? Again, the first person who said mentioned jobs. I didn't hear what the organization was.
Washington Post.
Just Post. Okay, thank you.
And having said that, I would like to give the talk over to Jen. So Jen Golbeck is a professor at University of Maryland. She's the director of Social Intelligence Lab. And as you guys might know, she's a very renowned person in the field of social media analytics. And
Great,
Jen.
thanks. So yeah, did y'all read the comments on this post? It was so much fun, all of the great comments. I tweeted my favorite one of them out. I think it's my second favorite to the one about complaining about the use of big words, which I thought was an awesome. See, somebody read that one. I thought that I was like, I use those words all the time. So apologies in advance. Yeah, so hopefully those of you who were doubters in the comments, I'm going to win you over to talk about fake news. Obviously, this is a huge topic, right? And it touches on lots of things. I'm trying to keep this really focused on the data science challenges for fake news as we talk about this today. Obviously, there's a huge amount of psychology, sociology, policy, politics that falls into this. Philosophy, depending on where you go, and I'll talk a little bit about how we get into those discussions, but those are not the discussions I'm going to have today. I really want to focus on what are data science solutions going to be able to bring to this problem, and how do we talk about it. So that's going to be our focus for this time. Let's start off just by doing some definitions, right? And oftentimes, like, that's a really boring way to start a talk because we all kind of know what we're talking about, but I think in this case, we totally don't know what we're talking about. We all maybe know in our own minds, but as I was going through this, like, I don't have some gold standard definition that I'm going to try to get you all to agree on, but there's a lot of nuanced places that we should talk. So what counts as fake news? I think we can identify some things that definitely aren't, and some things that definitely are, and then some interesting stuff in the middle. So let's start off with one that's not, right? Trump loves the term fake news. In fact, if you go to the Trump Twitter archive, so this is trumptwitterarchive.org, they archive all of his tweets and they aggregate them in all kinds of interesting ways. They have a section just on his use of the term fake news, which he uses, I think, just for stuff he doesn't like, right? So this is a really recent one. This is from a couple days ago where the polls came out that showed he had like a 30% approval rating, and he's like, yeah, fake news, right? I mean, you might not like them, but I really struggle to find any great definition of this being fake, right? It's reputable, it's agreed upon sources that did this polling, they used well agreed upon methodologies for it. Now you could dismiss that whole industry, which maybe is what he's doing here, but he likes to use this term for any organization or news story he doesn't agree with. And so I think we're going to put that outside the realm of what we're talking about, right? I don't want us to be fake news is news I disagree with. Right? There's a space for analyzing that, but that is not what I want to talk about today as part of the challenge. What about this one? I went real old school with this one. Is this fake news or not? For those of you not familiar with this picture, Dewey did not defeat Truman. This is a misprint. I don't know, I first saw this like in the opening for Cheers, right? Which I watched like on reruns as a kid. Yeah, so this is an error, right? Because here's people just like jumped the gun, got it wrong. Dewey did not defeat Truman. But these kinds of things happen all the time, right? So Cody, who's also at the University of Maryland with me, I heard you talking about this before. You know, we run into situations like this a lot now, especially when we have breaking news, right? There's some event unfolding. You especially see it in like terrorist attacks. We've done work on the Boston Marathon bombing, or I've watched Cody do work on that. Where if you remember when that happened, there's all this news coming out about multiple bombs going off across the city and all kinds of responses, stuff that wasn't happening. But it wasn't fake, right? It was just, we didn't have any great information at the time, and so news sources were reporting what they were hearing from people on the street. They didn't have time to verify it. Maybe you just don't have a source to verify some of this stuff. And so there's inaccurate stuff reported all the time in the news. Sometimes because it's a breaking event, sometimes because you just got it wrong. There are mistakes that have always been made. But I don't think this counts as fake news, right? It's not fake, it's just wrong. And when organizations make these kinds of mistakes, if they're reputable journalistic organizations, they will go back and admit that they made a mistake. Now, some places print stuff, and then only when they really get nailed on the fact that it's fake, they'll be like, oh, it was just an honest mistake, right? It totally wasn't. It was irresponsible. That's another problem, right? But I think we want to put this, again, outside the space of fake news, which is news organizations will sometimes report things incorrectly without any intent of deceiving people. And when you look at the definitions that have been put out there for what's fake news, they often contain this element of having the intention to deceive. I don't know if I agree with that always being part of the definition, but I think it's useful in kind of guiding us as to where we might want to draw that line. Because here's a good one. This one's going to show up a lot when we're talking here. This is completely false. This did not happen, but this was a very popular story on social media. It got shared all over the place. Completely fabricated from whole cloth. The Pope put out a statement after this started circulating saying, no, I did not endorse Donald Trump. I do not endorse Donald Trump. Absolutely 100% made up. Published with the intention to deceive. Was very successful at it. Totally fake news. Right? This is firmly on the side of fake news. It did not happen. It was made up. We all good with that? Does anyone want to argue that on my definition? Okay, good.
Was that from The Onion?
No, that's a true story. We'll get to The Onion. What about this one? There's 3 great stories on this cover page. Wife shrinks cheating husband and keeps him in a jar. That's up at the top. Blind cuts terrorize West Virginia, and then Obama appoints a Martian ambassador. Is it fake news? I mean, I don't. It's clearly fake, right? Is it fake news? I mean, does it have the intention to deceive people? And does that matter here? And then The Onion, right, which you just brought up. This is from yesterday. There's a whole article that I kind of wanted to put in here. I was really sad about like all the emails that he's going to have to deal with. So are these 2 fake news? Right? I mean, I think probably not. But, so there's satire. I mean, the Weekly World News is going to say, like, no, like, we're the real news, right? But certainly The Onion satire, the Weekly World News is kind of its own space. I think they're not going to count as fake news in my definition either, but they're a super important part of this equation. Because, Onion, satire, but you know what I find myself doing a lot is like reading headlines now, being like, is that The Onion? Or is that like reality? Are you guys doing this? Right? This is, like, it's gotten way worse, right? But it's hard to tell. And The Onion has always, put itself out there, obviously, as satire. But there's a lot of places that are doing satire that are not straightforward about it, right? And there's a lot of subtle satire out there at this point that you'll see will either play to the right or the left, where they're satirizing those positions, but the people on the left are totally reading it as true, if it's satirizing the left. Or if it's parodying the right, the people on the right are like, yeah, right? They believe it. The other side is kind of seeing it as satire, maybe. But there's this real space of like, where are people just acting like the other side? Where aren't they? The Golbeck report sort of had this problem, right? The people on the left like clearly saw it as satire. A lot of people on the right were like, love this guy, right? He's speaking my truth. So I think there's an important problem, isn't a problem for us to address with data science, of being able to distinguish satire from not satire. I think anything that's going to address the fake news problem has to address that part of it, which is why I throw these in here. Because I agree they may not be fake news, but they're things that are going to screw up any fake news algorithm that we want to talk about. Okay, so part of the definition we've talked about is the intent to deceive, right? Which the Pope Trump thing clearly gets. So what about this one? This is part of a conspiracy theory that says the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary, where all those kindergartners and first graders were killed, actually didn't happen. Nobody died, there was no shooter, everyone you saw in the news was an actor, and that the whole thing was a false flag operation organized by the Obama administration to support their anti-gun agenda. This is not like one guy's conspiracy theory, this is all over the place. If you go start reading about Sandy Hook anywhere online, you're going to find these people showing up there. So this is a conspiracy theory, right? Does it have the intent to deceive? Is it fake news? I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. They want to convince you that this is true, right? But they don't think it's fake, right? The people who made up the Pope endorsing Trump thing, they knew that they were making something up. And, you know, they want to get likes or get clicks. Maybe it's propaganda. Maybe they're just trying to make money by getting visitors. The people who really believe in these conspiracy theories don't think they're trying to make you believe false things. They don't think they're trying to deceive you. They think they're trying to get you to see the true thing. Which is why this definition is tricky, because I want this caught by my fake news filters, right? These conspiracy theories have real consequences, right? This is just a cruel, terrible thing that is really, like, you see the parents of the Sandy Hook kids, and like they're kind of terrorized by these people all the time. You look at Comet Ping Pong, right, which is the background of my slides, the slide that we opened with. I mean, some guy shows up there and starts shooting the place up, right? Because he absolutely believes this conspiracy theory that there's a child sex ring being run out of this pizza shop up on Connecticut Avenue. And then once he shows up, he's like, oh, I guess that wasn't true, right? These things are dangerous, right? This scares me more than the Pope endorses Trump, right? I want these caught by fake news. So do I have the right definition for us? No, I mean, I think we're all going to kind of draw that boundary in different places. I think if you say satire counts as fake news, like, that's cool, right? Like, you can make that argument and do some data science around that. But I think it's important to think about all these different aspects of the problem. Not just so we come to an agreed upon definition, because I don't think we necessarily need that, but so we start to think about what are the different facets of this problem, because you don't solve the fake news problem. You solve one aspect of this problem, and maybe you put a bunch of those pieces together to solve it in a bigger way. But for example, I think there's a really interesting challenge in identifying satire and differentiating it from real news. I think that's a very hard problem. I think someone could write a dissertation on it. I'd love to work on a paper on that. I think it's totally different than the problem of identifying conspiracy theories, right? Which is another thing that you could do, but the features are going to look different, the data is going to look different, and that's going to be different than these Pope endorses Trump stories, which are straight up fabrications, which I think is the kind of classic thing a lot of us think about with fake news. Also really important to be able to identify those. So we want to think about what are all these different aspects, which ones are we interested in, and what are the things that we need to actually be able to address that. So that's kind of how I want to start definitionally with this. Then what, right? So we pick whatever aspect of this we care about, then how do we start working on the problem? So I see kind of three major challenges for data science in this space. First is how do we detect the content, whether that's straight up fabricated stories, it's conspiracy theories, whatever. How do we identify something as whatever the kind of fake news is that we're looking at versus not? How do we detect the sources, whether it's a bot or a website or a human that's sharing this content? How do we detect those? And then how do we modify the incentives to make it less likely that this kind of content is out there, right? Because we care about fake news because fake news can do damaging things. Whether it's in an election or it's conspiracy theory, we want to have some way of modifying people's willingness to believe it, to have to repeat it, to have to refute it, because if you're refuting fake news, that actually makes the fake news more credible the more you see it repeated. So we want to find a way to be able to identify this and ultimately filter it somehow, or discourage people from doing stuff with it. And so there's all kinds of social science around that, but I think there are data science questions about what are the incentives, what groups are they going to be effective for, and how can we adjust that so we have an impact on it. So I'm going to talk about each of these three things. We're going to start with detecting the content, which I think is a super interesting problem. But it also brings up one of the big challenges to doing data science in this space, which is we don't have a lot of great data to work with. There's not a ton of fake news data sets, right? There's a few little ones. There's some that touch on the problem in different ways, but it suffers, I think, in part from the definitional challenges that we talked about before. So there's a project called the Fake News Challenge. Were any of you in this, or do you know about it? Nobody? That's fine. I was really excited about the Fake News Challenge, which is something that a bunch of people started putting together a little bit after the election, right as this kind of was discussed as a really big issue in the press. So we're going to do a Fake News Challenge, basically provide a data set, come up with a way to measure how well you can detect fake news in this data set, and put it out there for people to build algorithms and share it. So we're going to work on this problem. There's tons of these challenges, right? So I said, all right, this is a great idea. Let's start the discussion. So we set up a Slack channel, and I get in there. All right, how are we going to put together this data set? right? So first we said, well, maybe we use like Snopes or PolitiFact as like our ground truth, right? Is this true or not? Which I think is a pretty solid way to start building a data set, right? It's, it's going to be biased in some ways, but like that's a legitimate way to start this. But like, well, it maybe is a violation of Snopes' terms of service to just scrape their site. Okay. PolitiFact, I guess they couldn't, I wasn't organizing this, but there seemed to be some problem doing these partnerships. And I said, all right, well, we could get together a team of human labelers and create one of these data sets. We've done that in my lab. We worked on one project we had, we were looking at online harassment, so we had about 50,000 tweets. We had a team of about 30 people. We spent 9 months building a data set on harassment that we've now released and people can use to do public research. So we could build a slightly smaller version of that for fake news, get a bunch of people together. And what happened, and I hate when this happens, so we get in this discussion, I'm like, okay, here's, the Pope endorses Donald Trump. All right, we can kind of agree that that's fake. Here's the Sandy Hook conspiracy theory, and we go, well, a lot of people believe that that's true. So who are we to say that it's not true? And I'm like, because it's not true, right? Like, absolutely is not true. And they're like, well, some people are going to say that it is. So, like, who gets to decide? And it would devolve into this discussion of, like, what's the nature of truth? Right. That's an interesting question, but man, people have been asking that question for an awfully long time. And I don't think we're going to solve it in the month that we put together this data set for the Fake News Challenge, right? Whenever a discussion gets to, but what's the nature of truth, I leave the discussion. I agree it's important, and I don't want to be the one talking about it. And so I actually left the Slack channel, and they did eventually run the Fake News Challenge. But the way that they ran it is that they had articles, and they had the headline of the article, and then they had the text of the article. And the task was to identify, does the text of the article agree with the headline? Does it disagree? Does it take no opinion but does discuss that topic, or is it about something totally different? So it kind of became a clickbait kind of thing, which is fine. I mean, that's an interesting problem, right? It's one, I think, really narrow slice of those bigger problems that we were just talking about related to fake news. And so I feel like it was kind of this missed opportunity to put together this great fake news data set that didn't happen, which is not to diminish what they did, right? There's good in what they did, but it didn't get to this problem. This, I think, is, I don't have a great solution. I have one solution. I would love to do this. I think building data sets is a really important part of being a member of a data science community. That we're not just building algorithms, we're not just doing statistics, we're building data sets. So if you all want to help me, send me an email. I'll put my email address at the end. We'll put together a team of 50 of us, and we will come up with our own definition of truth that we will not debate deeply, and put together a data set that's going to be useful. And here's another part of what I think is necessary before I jump into this. And I saw some of this in the comments about this meetup beforehand, and I've had this experience in talking to people about fake news. I was talking to a guy at Google about this. I said, this Pope endorses Trump stuff, we should be able to find a way to differentiate that kind of content from real news. And he goes, yeah, but there's, what about this? What about this really kind of gray area edge case? I mean, this is an engineer's question, right? There's a ton of gray area edge space. That doesn't drive me quite as crazy as what's the nature of truth? But those questions I find really frustrating, right? Because we have almost no solutions to this fake news problem now, other than hand-labeled sources of fake news, right? Or a bunch of people have flagged this as fake news. That's about as good as we're doing at this point. So help me build a solution that's going to find the worst 20% of the fake news and identify that. The easiest 20% we're going to flag successfully. We'll get all the other stuff wrong, we're going to throw out all those results, and it's going to be really good on the fakest of the fake. That's a big contribution to the space at this point, right? And I think, if you're an engineer and you're building production systems, of course you want to think about all those gray areas, and those are super important. But if you're jumping in to tackle a problem that doesn't have a lot of solutions, man, take the easiest path, because you're going to discover all kinds of interesting stuff along the way. You're going to help identify those gray areas better, and you're going to be really productive because you're going to have solved 20% of the problem. No one else will ever solve 20% of the problem, right? So I think as we put together, if we put together data sets, let's make them super obvious. detect the super obvious stuff and like, don't even bother with the middle part, you're gonna do great work, right? So, help me build a data set, right? That's gonna be a challenge that underlies all of the possible solutions that I talked about. But what I do want to talk about here is some work that's been done in kind of a related space. This is a project by Srizan Kumar, who was a PhD student in Maryland. He's now at Stanford. He let me borrow his dissertation defense slides, so thank you to him for that. He's done work, his dissertation was on detecting malicious behavior online, which included things like sock puppets and vandals, but also hoaxes, which is kind of like the fake news equivalent on Wikipedia. So articles that are put up that are fake, that are just kind of made up stuff. He set out to say, with a team of people, the reference to one of their papers is at the bottom here, and I will post these slides later, by the way, so if you can't read it, you'll be able to get it all after the talk. Can we identify pages that have been up on Wikipedia for a while that are hoaxes, that are made up? And they looked at a bunch of different features that might be able to give us insight into whether a page is a hoax or not. I think this is useful because this is what we're going to do with fake news, right? We're going to look at what are all the features that we can come up with and which ones are predictive to help us separate fake news from real news. It may not be exactly these, but I think they give a really comprehensive look at different features that you can include in a model that was very successful on Wikipedia, and a lot of this can be ported in one way or another to the fake news problem. So starting with appearance, how does the article look? So they looked at things like, how long is the text? The plain text to markup ratio. So markup is going to have things like citations, or tables, or references to other data, links to other pages. So any kind of non-plain text that you put in a Wikipedia article will be markup. The wiki link density and the web link density. So how many other wiki pages are you linking to, and how many external pages are you linking to? And when they found that hoax articles tend to be longer, they mostly have plain text, so there's not a lot of markup in them, and they have fewer web and wiki links, which is, like, on one hand, not surprising. On the other hand, you just got to get the data and get in there and look at it to see what's going to stand out. The link network, I love this because I'm like a network person, right? I love graph theory. So you can look at how does the article connect. Does it go out to a bunch of articles that look like this? So you'd say it's an incoherent graph. That's not incoherent in terms of the text. It means there's no links between these pages that I've linked out to. Or do those pages maybe link to each other, right? If those pages link to each other, then you have a more coherent article, looking at what we're linking out to, because then you know there's connections among the content that I'm linking to, as opposed to I've just picked some random pages to link to. This kind of network structure, we're going to talk about detecting bots a little bit later. This exact kind of thing shows up there as well. Network structure can be super informative. And so what they found is that legitimate articles are more coherent in terms of the structure of this network than successful hoaxes, or hoaxes that stay up for a while on Wikipedia. So that network structure is predictive. Support. This is incoming links. Who links to these hoax articles? So what are the features that you can look at? The number of prior mentions, the time since the first mention, who created the first mention. So if I make a fake Wikipedia page, who's going to link to my fake page, right? I mean, this is something Wikipedia looks at. So if nothing links to the page that I made, they're going to take it down. So I've got to get links coming in from other places on Wikipedia. What do those links look like? Well, there's not a lot of them. They're more recent, and I think this is super interesting, they're created either by accounts that have an IP address, which means the person wasn't logged in, or the person who made the article, right? I made this fake article, I go to your page, I edit your page to link to my fake article, right? And what you can see in this graph over here, this is pretty interesting. So these two bars, the blue and the gray bar, these are hoax articles, successful ones and ones that got caught. These are real articles, fine real articles, and ones that we accidentally said were fake, but weren't. And what we're looking at on the y-axis is the first mention was created by, and the bars are separated to either be an IP address or the article's creator. So the bigger this bar is, the more of these sketchy sources of the first link they have. And so what you see is that the hoax articles, both the ones we caught and the ones that weren't caught, have a higher rate of that first link being created by the IP address or the creator than the real articles, even the ones that we accidentally flagged as fake, right? Which makes sense, right? It makes sense that if I have a fake article, I'm going to be the one creating the link to it. But of course, we're going to see that in legitimate articles too, right? So I might write a graph theory article and go find the pages that need to reference it and go create those first links too. But we see that much more among the fake articles, and to the point where it can be a predictive feature. And then finally, the editor. So who made the page? And you can look at things like what's the age, how long has that editor been on Wikipedia, and what kind of experience do they have? What other articles have they edited? Not surprising here, people who create hoaxes tend to have newer accounts, and they have less editing experience, so they've worked on fewer articles on Wikipedia. Not surprising, but you put all these features together, and they all kind of make sense. And they made a hoax article detector that worked better than anyone that was out there. So these features that come from a bunch of different spaces can be really predictive of essentially Wikipedia fake news, right? So I think this is a good analog to look to for how we might transition some of the existing research into the fake news space. The features are going to be different, right? Because it's not all going to be wiki-based. So maybe the link structure that we're looking at will be different. You know, how do we identify a creator? What are the features of that creator? Those will be different. But it gives us an idea of some major categories where we can start looking for features, and also some promise that those features, even if they're kind of obvious things that we go, yeah, well, it makes sense that that's true, you put them all together and you can do a really good job of highly accurate detection and classification of this kind of content. So I think that's an interesting kind of data science way to approach this problem, and a promise from other research that it's likely to work. So space number 2, detecting the sources. This is where I'm doing a lot of my work in this space. So I like to break the sources down into a few ways. So we have human sources. There are humans that are sharing and posting this content. You know, some of people are just straight up tweeting it. A lot of times they're sharing other articles. And then we have bots or websites that are sharing this. Some of them are doing it just to make money, right? There's humans running this, so there's humans involved in everything. But if we're talking about sources, right? If your website is a source of something. Some are just doing it to make money. Some are sharing it for propaganda, so they want to influence your opinion on a person or an issue. Breaking that down allows us to look at a bunch of different aspects of this problem. In terms of detecting sources, I'm going to focus on the bots side of this. There's a couple projects I want to talk about. So these are both bot detection projects generally, not fake news bot detection projects specifically. So fake news bots fall into this space, but so do all kinds of other bots. But if we can identify fake news content, and we can identify bots, then we can identify fake news bots, right? Because the fake news bots are captured in here. So one great project, this is called Bot or Not, that's out of Indiana. If you Google Bot or Not, you will find their website, and they will let you put in any Twitter handle and tell you the likelihood that it's a bot. They have a bunch of publications on it. This one is from this year's ICWSM conference, where they really get deep into their models and the features, and they give a lot of great insight into how it works. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of it. So here's some of the features they look like, and some of these should look familiar from like 2 slides ago, right? They look at things like user features. What does my profile picture look like? When did I create my account? The same thing about my friends. What do their profile pictures look like? How new are their accounts? What does my network look like? How many people am I following? How dense is my social network? So how many of my friends are connected to each other? There's tons of great features here. I'm going to talk more about network stuff on the next slide. Temporal features like how long between posts or comments or retweets do I take? If it's scheduled, if I post at noon every day, it's a good chance I'm a bot, right? I have a bot, but I run a bot that tells you like what food is celebrated every day. Like today's National Rice Food Day, I think. Every day has a food. My bot posts at exactly the same time every day. Right? Really obviously a bot, so temporal features are predictive there. Content and language features, so do you post in multiple languages, just one language? What kind of stuff are you saying? What are the topics that you're discussing? And along with that, sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis is really powerful, but it turns out the patterns of sentiment among tweets from bot accounts is very different than the pattern of sentiment in tweets from real humans that are tweeting. And so all of those features filter into this Bot or Not project. So you can put in a handle, this one's mine, and it'll tell you the likelihood that it's a bot. So I have a 31% chance of being a bot. That's a little higher than it was, I think, because I've been doing a lot of retweeting lately as opposed to writing my own stuff. And then it tells you kind of why. So the English-specific features, it looks at the content, the sort of stuff in my tweets, and the sentiment of the tweets, and then the percentage chance that that puts me at being in a bot. So the content gives me a 32% chance, the sentiment is 26. And then other stuff like my friends, my network, temporal patterns, information about my profile. And then overall, using all the features, there's a 31% chance I'm a bot. Ignoring the content, using just this column, other features, there's only a 17% chance. You can put anything in there, and not only will it analyze an individual user like this, but you can put in a Twitter handle and it will analyze the followers of that account and tell you what percentage of the followers are bots. Interesting to put Donald Trump's account in there, by the way. You can try it out. Anyone can try this. It's free and open. You just have to authorize it with your Twitter account, and that's because of Twitter API rate limits. They couldn't run it on their own. So you have to have a Twitter account to get it to work, but then you can put anything in there and make your queries. So it's really interesting work. It's very good at identifying bots. Again, data here is a challenge. They used the DARPA Bot Detection Challenge data set, which a lot of bot research has used. It is no longer publicly available. I'm trying to get a copy from some people. I think they have to break some rules to give it to me because I wasn't in the challenge, which is why I don't have it yet. Which is a problem, right? Like, I want to do some bot research. It would be great to have some great, easy to access public bot data sets out there, and there's not many great ones. There are data sets floating around, but they're not just like you go download them and count them. This is a project that we're working on in my lab. It's my favorite little project that I've done. Benford's Law. How many of you know Benford's Law? A couple of you. Yeah, you should know. Yeah, I talk about it to you. So Benford's Law is super interesting. It's like my favorite little statistical thing. So it says, in naturally occurring systems, so think the surface area of all the lakes on the planet, or the population of every city on Earth. If you look at the first digit, what's the likelihood of getting any individual number? So our intuition would say, well, it's just as likely that we're going to have a number that starts with a 1 as a number that starts with an 8 as a number that starts with a 4. And that's not true, it turns out. Numbers in pretty much every naturally occurring system are about 31% of the time will start with a 1, and you get this smooth decline down to 9s that only make up about 4%, 4.5% of first digits. This is super powerful. This is used in financial fraud detection. So if you go through a magazine and write down all the numbers, or if you go through your tax returns and write down just every number that you have filled in on your tax returns, it's going to follow this pattern. It's going to follow this pattern so strongly that if it deviates, Benford's Law is now admissible in court as evidence of financial fraud. Yeah, it's that powerful. Now there's exceptions. So Radiolab did a great piece on this, I think like 2 years ago. So if you Google Radiolab and Benford's Law, you'll find it. There's one case where a firm showed up with this big violation of Benford's Law, and it's because like they sold this huge number of products that cost like $9.95. So they had this big spike of 1s, of 9s that wasn't normal. But you can explain it, right? So it's not like violating Benford's Law, 100% proof that you're fraudulent, but it's admissible as some evidence. So I heard that piece on Radiolab, and it just like I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I had heard of Benford's Law, but forgotten it before. And after about a week, I was like, I bet this works in social networks. Right? This is where I spend my time. So I spent like 3 months just grabbing data from social networks, where what I would do is say, I'm going to take my friends, and I'm going to look at their friend counts. What's the distribution of the first digit of their friend counts? Totally follows Benford's Law. So what you're looking at in my beautiful graph here, each color is a different social network. So we have Twitter followers and Twitter friends, Google+, Facebook, Pinterest. Pinterest followers is on there. LiveJournal. All these networks follow the pattern. Of your friends, about 31% of them are going to have a friend count that starts with a 1. About 5% of them will have a friend count that starts with a 9, and it perfectly follows this pattern. We did get one violation, so I have Pinterest followers in here. How many people are following me on Pinterest has this pattern. The number of people I follow on Pinterest does not have this pattern. There's this huge spike at 5. And that's because when you sign up for Pinterest, they automatically follow 5 accounts for you, right? So tons of people are following 5. And so it messes up the law. But this works on all these accounts. It works on the network as a whole, and it works for each individual's network. And so when I did this, I took a bunch of public data sets that were available, but for Twitter, I just randomly grabbed Twitter accounts by their user ID, the number, which you can't do anymore, but you could do then. And so I could look at these Twitter accounts. And what I did, I had about 50,000 Twitter accounts I had randomly grabbed. They all followed the pattern. But if I sorted it by how well they agreed with Benford's law, there was a handful all the way at the bottom in terms of like best agreement to worst. About 150 accounts didn't look anything like this, right? Totally violated Benford's law. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Let me go look at them, right? All the other data sets are anonymized with the Twitter accounts. I can go look at the Twitter accounts. And they all looked like this. So they're Russian, obviously, and if you look at the source, they're posting from apps, not from the main Twitter applications, but from apps that are hosted at .ru domains. They all look exactly the same. They're very clearly run by the same automated program. And they have this, like you translate the Russian, and there are all these weird, like some of them come from technical manuals like this. Some are excerpts from novels. A lot of them aren't even complete sentences. Like it's clearly just automatically grabbing Russian text and posting it. So I've been spending the last few years tracking down this Russian bot network. Some people have run some code for me on it because Twitter API limits really restrict the number of queries that I can make. But it looks to be over 100,000 bots are part of this network. A lot of them are just doing this all the time. But there's another subset of them that have link spam. So they'll post porn or they'll post, win a free iPhone kind of scammy stuff. And we think these kinds of accounts exist to just mess with the network structure, right? So all these people are following, all these accounts, and most of them look like this, but there's a spam account in there because they've got all these followers and people are retweeting them, and so maybe it looks normal. Except it doesn't look normal if you know about Benford's law. Because they automatically follow one another, and they do it in a completely abnormal way, which is how Benford's law detects a lot of kinds of fraud. Because you think I'm going to make the same number of 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, and then that's not how stuff actually looks. So this is something, this Benford's law work that I talked about here, I published in PLOS One in 2015. I have a new paper that's not out yet that's going to show the scope of this Russian botnet. But what we also found in that paper is that you can use this same pattern to detect basically bot interactions. So you can buy retweets or likes on your Facebook photos for really cheap. For $2, you get 500 likes on your Facebook photo. You pay it by PayPal. I've bought a lot of these lately. And it's instant, right? You pay your $2 and then instantly your stupid tweet has 150, like 150-ish, right? They try to make it look normal. And so if I buy 150, I get like 157 or 162. But then all the accounts that like that tweet are bots run by these like farms, right? And so you can go in and look at them, and they totally violate Benford's law where other accounts don't. So it's a way of detecting a lot of malicious behavior from bots online. I was talking to someone before we started. A really interesting thing is that I've been looking through, what is it that these bot farms are liking, right? What's stuff that people are buying likes on? And there's a lot of people who want their blog to look popular, and so they buy that. There's a lot of really sad on Facebook, a lot of teenagers are buying likes for their selfies, right? It's so sad, you go, oh, 700 people liked my selfie, and it's yeah, because you paid $10 to buy it. The really interesting thing that I found is that there's a lot of Trump tweets retweeted by the retweet bot farms. And so my next kind of lined up project is to see are they just randomly retweeting this? Because they will randomly go out and like and retweet stuff that's not bot. Or is there evidence that these bot farms are actually being paid to like that kind of content, which I think would be really cool. So check back with me in a year or see if I'm arrested. But I like this because what I've been talking about in these other examples are building these big feature sets, which is a lot of what I do. Build these big feature sets, pick the features that are most predictive, build these interesting models. But I love this because it's this one idea, right, that exists in the space of detecting fraud that we can translate into an online space looking for these sorts of accounts. Now, here I didn't happen to find fake news bots. But they're going to have some of these patterns too. And so there's really interesting ways not just to say, here, let's come up with a bunch of features that sort of make sense, but let's also engineer some features from what we know in the social sciences, from what we know in fraud detection spaces, from what maybe journalists know about these sorts of patterns. Because we can quantify those and implement them in this online space and potentially use that for detecting this kind of behavior too. So, detecting the content, detecting the sources. The next thing we want to talk about is modifying incentives. How do we get people not to do this, right? And for that, we need to know what their incentives are. So if we come back to this, the easy one are the websites and bots that are sharing, making up this kind of fake content for money, right? And that's people that are trying to make money, and their incentive is money, right? So if you take away their ability to make money on the fake news, that has the potential of reducing fake news, and this is starting, right? So after the election, when everybody started getting really upset about the fake news, both Facebook and Google said, well, we're going to identify these sites that are creating this kind of fake news, and we're going to block them from using our advertising products. You can't have Facebook ads, you can't have Google ads, they're not going to pay you, they're going to shut it down. That's their main source of revenue, right? So that's an effective way of modifying their incentives. I haven't seen great data released, like there's kind of vague statements that say it's having an effect, but I haven't seen great data on it. But I think it's an interesting approach, right? It's an interesting way to cut off one of these sources. If we look at bots and websites that are interested in propaganda, they want basically people looking at their content, and ultimately they want to affect hearts and minds. And like I said, it's not even that you need to buy into it, right? But if you see the same lie repeated over and over and over again, you start to go, yeah, I know that's wrong, but like, is there a little bit of truth in it, right? Getting it repeated, and there's lots of interesting psychology about this. So they just want to get people to see it. And if they just see the headline, that's okay. If they get them to the whole story, even better. And then we look at the humans, right? Humans who are posting this content. I break them into two groups. People who care about posting fake stuff. So if you go, hey, that's fake, they go, I don't want to post it, right? I mean, enough of us have been caught with these fake stories, right? Not necessarily this kind of fake news, but like, oh, like I had one year, this dog was rescued by this thing, the dog totally wasn't, like it was made up, right? Somebody, I think, snopes me on it, and I was super embarrassed, right? So I'm one of those people. I don't want to post fake stuff, I just want to post stuff, and if it's fake, I want to take it down. And then there's people who don't care that it's fake. In fact, there's some people, if you tell them that it's fake, they're more likely to post it, right? What do these people want, right? What's their incentive? Their incentive is basically likes, social capital, right, if we're using that kind of language. I want people to like the stuff that I'm sharing, whether they actually give me a Facebook like, or they just say like, wow, Jen carries really great content, right? I want that to earn that sort of social capital. And for some people who don't care that they're posting fake news, they have similar goals to propagandists, and that they want to sow this doubt. They want to make you not believe the thing you believe, even if they don't win you over to their side. How do we adjust those incentives? So some of that's going on. Oh yeah, I had to put this in here. So this is that Pope story, right? 868,000 shares. Right, that's not views, that's shares. So for every person who shared this, potentially hundreds of other people saw it. That was all over Facebook. The Snopes article, note from Francis, good title, 33,000 shares. Right? So this shows that you can't just combat this problem by having the other side. Right? And like you said, psychologically, you don't want to be hammering on this anyway, because it makes people more likely to believe the false thing, even if you're disproving the false thing. So what do? So Facebook has started doing this on some articles. So this Irish slave trade is a meme that you see a lot, especially among like the alt-right and white supremacist groups. And if you put that URL in, it pops up this message here. This is disputed by these sources. So this could potentially be effective for the humans who care about posting fake stuff, right? They go, oh, maybe I'm going to go check that out, or maybe I should hold off. Has it been effective? We don't really know. I've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence that it does make some people more likely to post it, because they go, oh, like the mainstream media is trying to keep me down. I'm going to post it 5 times. Right? Facebook says it's working. I've seen people who run like satire sites that are not like quite onion obvious about their satire, who have some of their articles blocked this way, who say that they haven't seen a decline in their link traffic. We don't have the data, but man, would this be great data to do data science on it, right? Because if we know who's doing this, who is this effective on, right? Who types in a URL and gets this warning, who goes on to post, and who stops? What websites do they go to after? Do they go through to the Snopes or the AP articles? There's so much that we can find out, right? You could potentially, and this is exactly the kind of problem I work on, classify people as receptive to this kind of warning, or not receptive, or like whatever anti-receptive is, like you're going to encourage them by showing this, right? You could totally classify people like that. If you have enough data about the people and you have behavioral data, you can absolutely build that classifier. That's what I do, build classifiers like that. It would totally work. It would be fascinating data science, which is not making the policy decision, do we show this or not, but it let us really understand, is it effective, and which people is it effective for, because it's not going to be effective for everyone. I have a solution that I like better, that I keep telling people, and so now I'm going to tell all of you, and hope that it gets out there. So if you try to share this Pope Francis story now, interestingly, this website doesn't work anymore, but the preview is still in Facebook's database. So I actually generated this preview last night. So you type in the URL, and it pulls up the standard URL preview on Facebook. It has the picture, the headline, a little summary, and then part of the link. This is all clickable, and it takes you to the website. Y'all have Facebook accounts? How many of you have shared an article on Facebook that you have not read? You just see this preview. Yeah, I totally have. Yeah, don't lie. You know you have, right? This is how this stuff spreads. This is why we have these great kind of headlines like this. This is not a clickbaity, you'll never believe what happened next headline that wants you to click through. This tells you everything to get you to share, right? Lots of people share this kind of content, and there's statistics on this. It's a huge percentage of people share content without having read the article. Because the headline is sort of a badge, right? It represents your tribe, your people, the thing that you stand for. You don't care what the article says. You just care that Pope Francis endorsed Trump. And you're going to tell all of your friends and you share the article. Right? I mean, that's how a lot of this works. That's how a ton of this fake news spread all over Facebook. So I think if you detect one of these, right, assuming we can detect the content or detect the website, it should show like this. A non-clickable link. No preview, just the URL. So you're not stopping me, right? You're not saying, Jen, you can't share this. You're just saying, go ahead. Your friends can copy and paste that link into their URL and go look at the website, right? It's not going to get shared in the same way. I think this is going to be so effective, right? Like, Facebook doesn't like me because I've said bad things about them, but if they liked me, this is the project that I would want to do. Right? Is to take 10,000 people who post fake stuff and give some of this intervention and really quantify, because obviously it's going to work, right? But to be able to quantify what impact does this have. And again, this is the kind of thing where maybe you don't want to use this intervention on the gray area, right? Is this fake news? Is it not? That's sort of true, it's sort of not. You want to use this on like the bottom 20%, the fakiest of the fake, or the really awful conspiracy theories. They get that kind of treatment, right? Now that's a policy decision, but if you have the data science to support, here's the impact that this sort of intervention is going to have, then people have the ability to make the policy, right? When are we going to use this intervention, which admittedly is extreme, when are we not? And so to kind of wrap this all up, right, what are the data science challenges that we have when looking at fake news? One is coming up with a definition. Again, I don't think as a community we need to agree on one, but I think you need to have a really clear one about the problem that you're addressing, and it probably shouldn't have the word fake news in it, right? It should be, I'm trying to distinguish, manufactured content from supported content, that kind of thing. So thinking about those definitions and the problem is one important part. Data is another one. Like I said, I would love to work on this problem, but I think, I can't solve this myself. We need to get lots of places releasing data that's going to help us differentiate all these different parts of the fake news problem. So we can build these really interesting models. We can do what I think is the most fun part of data science, right? Finding useful features, building useful models, doing some statistics on it. We absolutely have to do that, and I think there's a lot of promise from all these parallel areas that we will be able to do that successfully once we have the data and the problems clearly defined that we're going to work on. And then finally, identifying effective interventions. In reality, these are likely going to have to require partnerships with media organizations, which is a tricky thing in its own right. You know, what are they going to give you access to, what won't they? But the data science there is going to be awesome, you know, working in kind of the human space and what works. So with that, this is how you can get in touch with me. You can tweet me all kinds of abuse on Twitter if you want. Or you can leave it in the comments, I'll read it there too. Or, you know, feel free to send me an email about any of this stuff, but I'm serious about the data set building project. So if we do have a team of people that wants to do that, I'll set us up a whole thing and run it, and we'll figure out a great way to do this. With that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. I'm also going to stick around here once we're done before y'all go over to get drinks, and so I'm happy to chat with anyone. Thanks. You're the managers. Do we do questions in this one?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a mic? I'll speak up.
Now I'll repeat the
Yeah,
question.
I'll speak up. You haven't talked about what many journalists and intelligence analysts would add into this. If you're looking at a story and you're not sure whether it's true, what would the effect be if it's false and people believe it? The pernicious factor, to borrow a phrase from the comments.
That's right. You shouldn't use that word pernicious to make yourself sound smart.
No, I'm the one who used the phrase. And it means exactly what I said, and it is appropriate. It's something that causes extreme harm that's not obvious at first. So if there's some people out there saying that the moon is made of green cheese, and a lot of people believe that,
Yeah.
I'm not too sure that affects me very much. If some people are saying that vaccinations are harmful and you shouldn't vaccinate your child, that has immediate, well, not immediate, but it has long-term, extremely harmful effects,
Yeah.
assuming that vaccinations do work, which the bulk of scientific evidence seems to indicate. That story that they harm your child has tremendous potential for harm, so I would look at the kinds of stories that are unsupported. Some say, no good sources cited, and a consequence that could do a lot of harm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting, and I thought it was a great point. I think you had the first comment that showed up in the comments. I thought it was also an appropriate use of pernicious. It's I mean, I agree, right? Because that's going to inform a lot of this sort of policy making is what's the impact, right? If people don't believe in the moon landing, I mean, that's lame, right? But that's it, right? Nothing bad happens. People don't die because you don't believe in the moon landing. I think it's probably possible with the right data sets. It may also require just a prior knowledge of the population of these conspiracy theories, where it's not like a new one comes along and you have to automatically be able to detect the perniciousness or the impact of it. But you may be able to take one and put it in the space of kind of known conspiracies. And there are people who study this, who collect conspiracy theories. So that's a really interesting problem. I agree, it totally falls in this space. And it would be a very cool project to talk to some of those like sociological researchers who look at conspiracy theories, because there's so much great data on it. And to build, a database of this and then see how to classify things against that, I think that would be a really powerful result to put in this space. And potentially one of the more straightforward ones. I mean, just kind of thinking through it in my head, like if I were assigned that as a project, if you have all this data on known conspiracies, right? Because there's not that many. I mean, there's a lot, but it's not like the number of tweets, right? Because there's a whole lot. If you know all the conspiracies that you're going to try to address, you know a lot about the kind of language used in those conspiracies, the kind of topics that are used, all the flags, and so it seems like it could be straightforward to link an article to a known conspiracy. It'd be a fun project.
Or just, as I said, the journalist test, what would happen if people believed this? And if the consequences are potentially dire, I'm going to check my sources much more carefully before I disseminate it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's super important and totally doable, right, in the space of stuff that I think we absolutely do. Yeah, back there.
I thought this was great. I'm just curious about how you go about kind of detecting these bot networks are very even. Is it that the bot networks are always less
project from reading their papers. And I was on a dissertation committee, so I read enough, I guess. The hoax articles are less coherent, right? That's the result that they got. I think if you're looking at bots though, and you're looking at network structure, from what I've gained looking at a lot of bots, they tend to have much denser social networks than an average person would. So they do randomly follow, like these guys are following Vladimir Putin, a lot of these bots, right? Justin Bieber, a lot of bot followers, right? Because they'll randomly pick popular accounts and follow those. But they follow a lot of other bots. So what I've been doing to chase this down is like, I found, that handful of them, and I've just been looking at their friends and looking at their friends, and there's a lot of very clear signals that they're part of this specific network. And it's something like 70 or 80% of the people that they follow are bots, and they have connections within them. So it's not 100, it's not like a clique where they're all densely connected, but it's much denser than you would normally see. Now that's not a feature that I'm using. I think that network density feature is in the bot or not detection. It's one of the features they look at. It may vary, but at least in the bots that I've looked at, it's kind of the opposite of the wiki effect. They tend to really cluster the people that they're with. Sure.
So I haven't encountered the Facebook truth cop yet, but it looked from the slide that it wasn't providing like links actually to the Snopes article or like any real context, like when you look at actually where does Snopes say this. So I'm curious what you think about like the question of what if it's an issue not of that the people need sort of like to see less, but what if the people need to see more like in context, like because the person who wanted to follow up on that Snopes, they'd actually have to like open up a new tab, search that, find the Snopes result, they go to the page and find maybe where in the Snopes page you actually kind of said, this is the problem.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about kind of going the other direction? Like instead of sort of pulling back on what people are being shown, but showing them more in context.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And kind of before this whole fake news thing became an issue, like just when it was annoying that people were sharing stupid stories that were debunked, right? I was kind of like, like Facebook shows like those 3 recommended similar articles on other things, like they should cross-reference it against Snopes and just put the Snopes article right underneath. So, they kind of do that anyway, like now that has naturally emerged as a common thing. But yeah, I agree, so I haven't run into it myself either, like that's a screenshot from Facebook, that's not one that I got. I haven't been flagged yet. But I totally agree, if you're showing that warning, you can't, it's going to be way less effective if you just show the warning. I think you have to do exactly what you're saying, is to show the context to really highlight where it is. Because some people will respond like, oh, if you're saying that it's bad, it's probably going to be bad. Potentially for some people, educating them will be a necessary next step. So I love the idea of showing more context. Yeah. If I were designing it, it would be in there. And maybe it is, right? It just wasn't in that screenshot, but I haven't run into it. How are we doing on time, Time Master?
Almost on time. I mean, we can have 2 more.
We'll take two more questions.
2 more questions, sure.
So it seems like a lot of these bot makers are somewhat lazy, like things like Benford's laws, a simple logarithmic distribution you can easily fake. You can copy other people's networks. Are you seeing any evolution in time of the bot networks becoming sort of harder to detect by these sort of trivial?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this Benford's law thing, I'm so proud of it. And like once it's out there and somebody's using it, it's going to be worthless, right? It's going to work for like 6 months. I mean, it's totally analogous in terms of bot detection, I think, to the spam problem. I was working on like spam-related stuff. I remember I went to what I think was the first conference on email and anti-spam. Was the name of it. 2003. I was a graduate student. That's like when we released the Enron data set, right? We got all this stuff. And spam detection sucked back then, right? It would catch all sorts of good stuff. We all remember getting like tons of porn in our inbox, right? Because like the spam would run Viagra ads, right? It would just come through. And you had this kind of constant back and forth. Oh, so we improved this, and then the spam would change this. And you even saw this on web search kind of before that, right? And you get a lot of porn, and you search for broccoli, and you get porn, right? And then the web search got better. And after about a decade of that, occasionally some spam will get through, but spam filters are really good now. Web search results tend to be really good now in terms of blocking out that kind of spam. And so I think we're at the beginning of that race against bots. Absolutely. I mean, like the Benford thing is not going to, I guess, keep catching the lazy ones, right? But the smart ones are going to get past that. They're going to figure out a lot of these other features too. I think mimicking like natural network patterns, is an interesting research problem that you'll be able to do you probably could do just fine now if you work really hard at it. But eventually we'll get to a point where they're still trying to break through, but our technology is robust enough. But yeah, I mean, I think for probably the next 5 years, the bots are just going to keep getting around everything we need. One more, yeah, here in the front.
So it's like a data source aggregation initiative. So you mentioned LitFact and Snopes.
Yeah.
And I actually interacted with LitFact regarding the biggest lack of anything to debunk the lies surrounding the 2011 data changing. So, which leads to my point. Do you know how that team is dealing with conspicuous biases?
On PolitiFact?
Yes.
How they're dealing with it? Not really. I've got very little insight into the inside of their organization. Like, I worked with them on one article in the election, I think about, like, could the Trump campaign hack Facebook? And I'm like, probably not. But yeah, in terms of how they're dealing with those issues, I don't have a lot of insight, unfortunately, to the inside. I guess with that, we're done with me talking. If you can come up and talk to me one-on-one afterwards. But thank you all. But I will post you tweet a link to the slides as soon as I'm sitting in my computer. Hey, nice to see you again.
It's on Facebook. And I've never seen anything. It's there, and you'll go on YouTube probably about tomorrow. Yep.